So whenever you begin to create gameplay in your games, you'll need to learn how to script. Scripting is the process of creating code to create interactions in your game and certain behaviors. And so what we want to do is we want to create a brand new script and begin the process of creating the behavior of our player. So to do this, we'll go ahead and we'll right click and we're going to create a C# script. Now you have two options whenever you are scripting in Unity. You have C# and you have JavaScript. Typically you will find more help on the C# language than you do with JavaScript. However, whichever one you're most comfortable with, you could use that. So let's go ahead and click on C# script. Now doing this, you'll be able to give the script a name. In this case, I'm just going to call it player. Hit enter, and that will create a new script. And with that script selected, you'll see in the inspector some of the code that is generated in this script. Now to be able to edit this code, you'll need to double click on the script in the project browser, and it's going to bring up Visual Studio or MonoDevelop. Now you can use either one at install. So you could choose to install Visual Studio 2015, and typically that is the default install. But if you decided not to install Visual Studio and you want to use Unity's built-in MonoDevelop, you would have to open it up there. If you want to change in between the two, you can simply go into Edit, Preferences, and then inside of your preferences you have External Tools. Here is your external script editor. If you want to switch to MonoDevelop, you would simply click on the drop-down and choose MonoDevelop. Let's go ahead and close this down, and let's open up Visual Studio, as that's what we're going to be using. Now in this script that we've been given, there are several lines of code, and we're going to talk through what each one of these pieces are, and we're going to get a better understanding of how Unity works with scripts. So to start, you'll see right at the top we have 3 lines of code that use similar keywords at the beginning of each line. You'll see that denoted with the using keyword. These 3 lines of code are telling the Unity engine, or telling this script, what libraries or assemblies it should use. These are called namespaces. Namespaces are really great to help you organize your code, and they also allow you to access certain methods that are in these particular namespaces. So for example, for us to use some of the methods that Unity has created for game creation, we would be using the Unity Engine namespace. Now there are other namespaces that we could use with the Unity Engine. To give you an example, we could actually type in a line of code by using the using keyword, and then we would say Unity Engine dot AI. Now that is one of those namespaces that we could use. Now from here, we could go ahead and save this and use that line of code, or what we could do is simply comment it out if we don't want to use it. And that's going to leave the line of code in, but it's just going to skip over that. Or you could just simply remove the line of code, and you won't have to worry about any of that. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next line of code that we see. You'll see a few different things here. There are a couple of keywords. We have the keyword public, and we have the keyword class. The keyword public is an access modifier. An access modifier will give other scripts access to this class. So for example, let's say that we have some script that handles the player's health, and we want another script to access that by possibly taking damage or giving damage to the player. That other script would have to have access to this one. And in this case, we would set it to public. Now you could also set it to private, but nothing else would be able to access this script. So it's a way of being a gatekeeper. The next keyword that we have is called class. In Unity, we typically use object-oriented programming to create functioning scripts. And I like to think of classes as a simple task. So right now, we are creating a class for the player. Now, the player might have several things that it could do. It might be able to move, it might have an inventory, it might be able to use a ranged attack or even a melee attack. Those simple tasks can be modified to be classes themselves. Now, you might be wondering what is the point of using separate classes if we have a player script or a player class? With object-oriented programming, the goal or the aim is to create smaller scripts so that way if one of them were to break or not work as intended, it wouldn't break the other systems. It's kind of a modular workflow if you want to think of it that way. So in this case, we're just going to use the class player as an example. You'll also notice that there is a colon after player and the word monobehavior. What this means is that Unity will allow this script to be used as a component. That means that this script can be dragged and dropped onto our player game object, or really any game object in the scene, and it will drive that particular object. Below this line, we have the void start method. Because we are using the Unity Engine namespace, as you can see at the top, we have the availability to use this method called start and method called update. These are called built-in methods, also known as built-in functions. The start function or method simply tells this script to execute the code that is within the brackets at the start of the game. So the moment that you hit play in the editor, this code will run. Now typically we use the start method for initialization of variables. So let's say that we had a variable that was to set the player's starting health. We could create a variable that is waiting for a value, and then we could use the start function to set that value. Now the next method or function is called the update method. Update is going to be called every single frame when the game is running. So this means that you would use some sort of code to always check for player input. So if you needed to wait for a mouse click on the player, this code is going to run every single frame, and the moment that the player uses input, whether on a controller or on a mouse or keyboard, it will then execute that code. So now that we have kind of an understanding of the basic script and the lines of code, you've probably heard several terms that you may not understand at this point. And so what we're going to do now is we are going to look at some of those terms, and we're not going to get very deep into this subject because we have a course that is called C# Scripting Fundamentals in Unity for you. In this case, we're just going to move on, and I'm going to show you what a variable is next, and then we'll also talk about functions, also known as methods.